Welcome to Connecting to Spirit. I am your host, Lisa Brandis, and I'm here to help you unlock your intuition, channel with clarity, and deep dive into self-discovery, all while navigating the ups and downs of personal and spiritual growth. If you're ready to say goodbye to self-doubt, embrace your unique gifts, and connect with a supportive community on the same journey, then you're in the right place. Whether you're just starting out or you've been walking this path for years, this podcast is here to guide you, support you, and inspire you every step of the way. So grab a cozy spot, settle in, and let's dive into some empowering insights together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I'm Lisa Brandis, your host, and I'm so excited to dive into a topic that is deeply important to me: self-care for healers. As healers, intuitive guides, and spiritual practitioners, we dedicate so much of our time and energy to others, but how do we ensure that we don't burn out in the process? To help us explore this, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Laura McVeigh. Laura is a holistic counselor, an intuitive Reiki master, and a passionate advocate for empowering others through self-care and energy alignment. She creates a supportive space for her clients to transform stress and overwhelm into a sense of rejuvenation and balance. And with her extensive knowledge, she helps people around the world make meaningful changes in their lives. So welcome, Laura.
I'm very excited.
Well, as one of my Reiki masters, it has been such a joy to witness your evolution over the last 5 years. It's been since you became a Reiki master, and I'm so proud of witnessing your remarkable journey and also bridging counseling and Reiki and energy healing to create really life-changing experiences for your clients. And today we were having a bit of a chat before we met about what kind of topic would be really relevant for people today. We talked about the experience of burnout. And it's a common thing with healers especially, and quite often it would be one of the biggest questions is, how do I not take on other people's stress? And when we're, empathic, it can be very easy to really tune into what's going on with others and then burn out. And so I wanted to talk to you specifically about what exactly is burnout.
Burnout is the idea that, well, let's start with stress, because everyone experiences stress.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily thing. We all live with it. But there is a difference between being stressed or being under pressure and burnout. So stress can be useful. It can be aggravating. When we're talking about burnout specifically, there's kind of 3 hallmarks that would separate burnout from being stressed. So the first one is emotional exhaustion. So that's the fatigue that we experience because we care too much for too long without that idea of refilling the cup, so to speak. The second big signal, and I think this is the one that people tend to notice first, is the depersonalization. So we're talking about depletion of empathy, depletion of compassion. It's like, again, we've just cared for so long. It's not that we don't care, but we cannot connect with that feeling anymore. It's just, oh, great, another thing we have to do, another session we have to run, instead of feeling the joy and the honor of being able to be in this healer position. And the third one is a decreased sense of accomplishment. And I think this is where people get really down and really start to notice the burnout, is that feeling of, it doesn't matter what I do, it's not making a difference. Not necessarily, I'm going to stop because why should I bother? But what is this for? It's not helping anyone. So those are the 3 big signs, I would say, that someone is experiencing burnout rather than stress.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes.
How do we recognize it? Because I would imagine, and probably looking at my own experience, these things creep up slowly. And,
Yes.
you can have one really good day where you feel amazing, and then you have a couple of really low days. And then after a while, the low days become more than the great days. So, I would imagine, and from my own experience as well, it can be quite challenging to recognize and identify that you might be experiencing burnout. So is there any telltale signs?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is one of those things where we start to think again about, are we chronically stressed or is this burnout? Because obviously chronic stress is something that lasts for a long period of time. There's the idea as well that not all stress is a bad thing. Some exciting things like buying a house or having a child are incredibly stressful, although they're very positive experiences. And I think a lot of the time people think, but this is such a good thing. Why am I burned out? I'm doing the job I've always wanted to do.
Mm.
Why am I not connecting with it anymore? So there's a whole range of symptoms, so to speak. So physical signs include things like issues breathing, digestive issues, painful muscles, headaches, even issues like heart rate and blood pressure being elevated, sleep disturbances, the things you'd kind of recognize. Mental
Mm.
signs can be things like jumping to conclusions, tunnel vision, blaming others, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing is a big one I recognize in a lot of my clients as well. And then probably really the biggest one that I notice is just that disconnect. So just knowing that you're supposed to be enjoying your time with your family and your friends and just not just not being able to
Yeah.
connect with that.
Yeah, and could that be described as just kind of a numbing sensation where you just, yeah, that feeling of kind of floating through your experiences without feeling the ups and the downs? Or is it
Yeah,
different to that?
absolutely. And this is where it tends to get very messy because all the things we've described also could be applied to if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with depression,
Mhm.
if you're dealing with grief. Believe it or not, a lot of those signs are the same.
Yeah.
So it is really, I feel, knowing yourself, knowing what this is, and then knowing when to get help. So maybe it
Mm.
is need a break, maybe you need to see a doctor. So tough
Mm.
balance.
Yeah, and I think we find as healers that quite often people that don't want to go and see a psychologist or don't necessarily want to go to the doctor, it's almost like a bit more of a gentle way of easing them into perhaps a recommendation or a transition to a therapist. It's like a safe kind of fun experience. It's a bit nurturing. They're not necessarily being labeled with anything by us. We do not diagnose in our therapy. So obviously you and I come with other skills. I am a clinical
Yes,
hypnotherapist, like you're a trained counselor. So we have these other modalities that sit alongside the Reiki healing that we offer people. But I have found through the thousands of students I've taught that it is a safe place for people to come and kind of first admit that they're having problems. Because a lot of us in society, we just squash, we suppress, we don't like those negative emotions. And so quite often people will go to all kinds of different ways of distracting ourselves. And in today's day and age, there's certainly no shortage of distractions, is there, to
no,
kind of take
social
us
media
out
for
of,
one. Oh my
my
gosh.
gosh, absolutely. So it sounds to me from what you're saying, the first thing we need to do is identify that we're having a problem, because we have to also move through, that we might be in denial. I know it wasn't me that brought the awareness to the help that I needed when I experienced burnout. It was my husband and one of my best friends. And I
Mm.
was literally still arguing with them saying, no, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem, because it felt too big to recognize and identify. And I just didn't want to stop the busyness that I had. And exactly what you said, I'm doing the work that I love. It's part of my calling. I was born to do this work. So it had nothing to do with the job, my purpose, my calling, because all those are the same and haven't changed. It was just the way in which I was working that was slowly over time depleting my energy to the point of being in dysfunction, in a state of dysfunction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I did actually get psychology. I went and saw a psychologist. That was a big step for me as a healer and as someone who teaches and empowers people, and is the standard I held for myself. And I'm sure there's other leaders and healers that would recognize and identify in this. It took a lot of courage for me to admit that I was actually having mental struggles. And even for a long time, I didn't talk about it with my students, because again, I had to protect that vulnerable part of me that was in pain and processing the healing I was going through. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we can still be an amazing healer and have, mental health issues, and we can still doing amazing work and still need to get help and support. So I think that the human aspect and the spiritual aspect coexist don't they?
We're not one thing or the other. And even the way you were speaking about that, being a healer and being a leader and being a mentor and a teacher is obviously a massive part of who you identify as. Come in and swoop in and say, not that you're not doing it right, but there's something interfering with it. That's a huge issue then with self-identity. So
and it was a massive,
that kind of just sits
massive
over the top.
identity crisis.
Yeah.
And of course, my big turning point story was that I used to have anxiety, and becoming a Reiki master changed all that for me. So my big story of transformation, and I'd never experienced burnout. Burnout came later in my life. But my big transformation story was that, Reiki healed my mental illness back then. So to then identify that, it's not doing it hasn't remained that way for my entire life, that was the part that I found, it was almost like I'm running retreats and I'm teaching people. So that's why it took me so long to identify that I had the issue, because of exactly what you said. It was a crisis of identity. Who am I then? If
Absolutely.
not, yeah. And the bigger the following, the worse it felt, right? And I had a big following, still do, but it was, huge pressure.
Imposter syndrome out there is going to say, well, if you're such an amazing healer, why haven't you fixed yourself?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But you know what the big breakthrough came? It came when my mum, I rocked up on mum's door sobbing my heart out. And she said to me, Lisa, you're not a robot. And it was like someone that loves me dearly, my mother, giving me permission to be human. And it was the pressure not anyone else put on myself. It was all the pressure that came from me to live up to this unrealistic standard of happiness, and recognizing that the minute I took the pressure off myself and when I don't have to be I don't have to be anyone's guru or anyone's spiritual teacher. I just have to be me. And then it allowed me to continue working, but from a place of new authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah, because how dare you be a human with feelings? Like, what were you thinking?
And you know what I found is that the students related to me. They're like, oh, God, you too,
Yes.
right? Because it actually made me more relatable, because people all have struggles. And I never judged anyone else, just judged my own, which was part of my, my makeup and how I'm wired. So what advice would you give to healers that struggle with a similar kind of experience, Laura? Either fear of being judged or even fear of taking care of themselves and getting the help that they need?
I think one of the interesting exercises that I've done with clients is and we've all done it, imagine you were talking to your best friend. Would you tell your best friend, be a robot, stop feeling, keep working, you've got to do this, nobody's going to take you seriously if you're not doing? You would never say that to your best friend or to your mum or to your child. No way on earth would you do that. So I think the first step would be speak to yourself with more compassion and more kindly. If you're not in a place where you're ready to hear it, that's okay too. But trust the people who are telling you. So if you're seeing your healer and they're saying, look, I'm a bit worried, you seem like you're heading down the road to burnout, or your mum says to you, or your husband or your best friend says to you, hey, something feels a little bit off. Do you trust them? Do you trust the information that they're giving you? Because it's coming from a place of love. First step, listen to the people that love you and treat yourself with some compassion, because this is a human experience. It is completely normal to be going through these sorts of very human experiences.
Have you been feeling called to learn Reiki? Not just to channel powerful healing energy, but also to awaken your intuition in the process. Now it's easier than ever. After 22 years of teaching Reiki in person, I've created a high quality online training experience that gives you lifetime access to become a certified and accredited intuitive Reiki healer. Through Intuitive Reiki International, you'll gain the skills to step into a rewarding new career. Plus, you'll connect with a thriving community of like-minded healers and make a real difference in people's lives. If you feel the calling, don't wait. The time is now to embrace your passion and start your Reiki journey. Visit intuitivereiki.online to get started today. Yeah, so perfect. And that's exactly what I ended up doing as part of my recovery from burnout, was learning how to be kinder with myself. And what I found, Laura, which is interesting, is that kindness is one of my top values, as is compassion. And over time, the burnout slowly eroded my self-love and my self-compassion. That's why it was a surprise that I was no longer being kind to myself, because learning to love myself was something I did 20 years ago. That was the early days of learning Reiki, and I've been practicing now for 22 years. So I really wanted to point that out to people. Self-love is an ongoing practice, and it's something that,
Absolutely.
we constantly have to work at. And sometimes we don't recognize when we've gone off track. I didn't recognize I was being hard on myself. Others were seeing it, but I didn't believe I was. And I think that's part of the distortion. We don't see ourselves clearly when we're in a bit of a dysfunctional state. And funny enough, I was catastrophizing, and it was my accountant that said to me, because I was in some panic over some financial thing, she actually pointed out to me that I was catastrophizing. And how did she know it? Because she had had anxiety. She had had someone point it out to her, a therapist, and then she was able to identify it within me. And she was the one that told me to go to my mum's. She said, just take yourself to your mum's. You need to get some help, right? Love comes in all different places and from all different people, right? At the time we need it. So,
Absolutely.
mm.
Back to that idea that you mentioned of guilt.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Guilt plays a big part in it, self-care and guilt. Mm.
Absolutely. And taking the time you need to look after yourself is,
Yeah.
I think, one of the biggest hurdles, because we are very conditioned to keep going, keep working, keep doing the things. You've got a to-do list you have to take care of. And like we spoke about yesterday, the thing that probably makes me madder than just about anything in the world, one of the top things, is when people say you have to fill your cup so you can give to others. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Just, you should fill your cup because you're a human being. I'm getting so aggravated just thinking about it. You should fill your cup because you're a human being and you are deserving of looking after yourself. And a lot of people struggle with that idea because, again, it's self. I'm a mum, I'm a carer, I'm a healer. I have to do all these things for all these other people. It's like, no, you should just look after yourself. And people find that really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I noticed, like, even your energy changed when you spoke about it, and you said yourself it makes you angry. What about that makes you? What is it exactly about that popular notion?
Because it's such a social piece of conditioning, isn't it? That you have to be nice, you have to be caring, you have to be good, you have to look after other people. You can just go die in a hole. Nobody cares about you, but you have to die looking after all these other people. Yeah. Chronic.
Yeah. So to totally reframe that, and I love it because quite often there is real wisdom in the things that irritate us in society, and it's because then profound change comes from the people like you, Laura, that speak up about a notion and challenge it, because sometimes we just accept these things as a given. It's almost like women are nurturing, right? All these kind of ideas that healers care for others. We're caring, nurturing people. It's part of our identity, part of our natural predisposition as well, that empathic people, especially those that are attracted to healing modalities or counseling, we're naturally caring, empathic people. So it's easy for us to fit into that mold of wanting to take care of others. So what would be the ideal situation for you if we were to flip that on its head and not be about self-care for others? What does the opposite of that look like for you? What's the ideal state that women, being that's mostly our audience?
Predominantly,
what would women?
You are deserving of boundaries. You are deserving of care. You're deserving of looking after yourself just because you are you. You don't have to do more, be more, give more. You're worthy of care. just because you're you.
Just going to sit with that for a minute, because that's powerful. That's powerful. And, do you know, I think back to I asked an amazing mentor and therapist a tip when I was first starting out in this career. I said, I was expecting some profound, it was profound, but it was not what I was expecting her to say. And she looked me in the eye and she said to me, the way that you can be the best therapist you can be, Lisa, is to love people. Because what we're all craving is more love. And what you do so naturally and effortlessly and easily is love others. And from that basis of open-hearted connection and true authentic love, people feel that, and in the resonance of that, people heal. People and exactly what you just described is just the state of love, not because you deserve it, not because you've, done backflips or, achieved an award or had lots of people at a workshop, right? You're loved because it's a basic human need. We all deserve it, and we shouldn't have to ask for it. A bit like the sun shines on us all every day. So love is there for us to receive and feel and express. Wouldn't it be nice if we could take it one step further? Wouldn't it be nice if we started there rather than waiting until we've burnt out before we get the help? What if we just get help because it's fun to do? Get help because it's so nice to have someone just run energy on you. What if we don't have to go to a healer because we feel like something's wrong in our life? What if we go to a healer just to maintain a sense of balance and to kind of catch things before they get out of balance, to increase a sense of well-being, not necessarily happiness, but what about just to bring us back to ourselves?
I have a theory that I love and I'd like to do more with it. I call it unglamorous or boring self-care, because we all love a bubble bath and a massage and a facial. But sometimes self-care is, did you need to go to the doctor? Have you made your appointment? When did you see the dentist last? Have you drunk enough water? Are you taking your medication like you're supposed to? Were you supposed to have that blood test that your doctor requested and you haven't done it yet? So all of these routine, boring things that really do contribute to our health and well-being. So why not have Reiki? Why not have a massage? Why not see a therapist, just as a routine part of, I'm a human being, I'm trying to look after myself. Therefore, I will do these things.
To me, it makes perfect sense. And I know from all of my experiences, I see my hypnotherapist once a month. We do a share with each other because we're both therapists, and we realize the benefit of, sitting down and having someone else kind of help us with the challenges that we're facing. And let's be honest, if you're human, there's challenges just around the corner. And to be honest, if, for those of you that are interested in growth happens from that place of discomfort, which means we're being challenged. We're either creating the challenge to grow and stretch because we want to thrive in life. And I just can't think of any reason why it shouldn't be part of our normal, natural self-care. And I love that it doesn't have to be glamorous, right? And it can be times when we go to the healer and open up and have a big cry, or we go to the healer and we share and express all the incredible things that are going on in our life as well. It's just nice to have that supportive partnership that is there 100% for you and there to guide you in what it is that is important for you to explore, and just to sometimes have, I know from my own experience, sometimes just a healer can hold space for us when we have lost that self-kindness and that compassion, and they can walk us through those negative, icky feelings and emotions that we don't really want to let out of our body. They can hold space to allow us to do it, and it just seems to flow a lot more effortlessly then, and doesn't feel as hard as if we try to do it all on our own.
The therapist relationship, they specifically, that when they talk about psychologists and things, they often say that the relationship with your therapist is the most important thing. It doesn't matter if they're doing CBT or ACT or whatever the modality is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the connection with that person that's the most important part. And I feel like that's same with anything, same with any healing relationship, any friendship. Knowing that you've got that person that you can connect with is so vital. to self-care, to boundaries, to everything.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And connection is needed now more than ever, because I think we feel we're connecting through social media, but it actually has been proven that it's not a real connection. And Zoom has its place, podcasts and things like this have its place in society, but there's
Absolutely.
just nothing truly like sitting opposite someone, person to person, getting a hug, sharing a cup of tea, and even sharing and expressing who you are. It's needed, and from a biological state, we actually need it to thrive. We need human touch. We need human connection. And I think we have an epidemic right now of people that are missing that and craving it and probably don't even know that they are. I've loved it. We've talked about burnout. We've talked about the signs and how to identify it. We've looked at how chronic stress shows up differently to natural stress in short-term experiences, how it can have a physiological effect as well as emotional. We've looked at ways in we can get support both in self-care but also reaching out and getting help. You did mention boundaries, and I know this is something that a lot of people do suffer with. Do you have anything you want to share around, in particular, having good, healthy boundaries?
But obviously the boundary that you have with a child is going to be different to a boundary that you have with your workmates, for example. So it's identifying the relationship, what is acceptable to you in that relationship. And then controversially, I'm going to say sometimes that needs to be flexible. So if you're at work
Mm,
and there is an absolute urgent deadline, but your boundary is that you leave at 4:30 on the dot because your hours are done. If it's a one-off thing and somebody says to you, please, we need you to stay. Could you help us out with this thing? Is it okay for you to bend your boundary that one time? Maybe it's okay,
mm,
maybe it's not, but that's for you to decide. And then I guess reboundarying the relationship is going to be
mm.
important. So what can you live with?
Yeah.
What is acceptable to you? What is not draining to you? Because so then if you're starting to feel resentful or like you're always doing the giving, maybe that's the time where you need to look at that boundary and say, okay, maybe it's probably a bit too flexible now, or I'm not being clear enough about it, or the other person isn't respecting what I've asked for. So kind of
Mm.
deciding how you're going to reel that back and determine how you're going to set that up again.
Yeah, I think that's actually not such a controversial response. It makes total sense to me, Laura. So thank you for saying it, because, and I see it the same as, with balance. It's almost like fine life work balance. It's like, well, can we really have a balance? Like we spend more time at work than we do at home, and we spend more time sleeping somewhat, and again, balance falls into that same category of as, yeah, what's working for us. So I love that. And sometimes we, again, need someone to share that with, to be able to help us to work out what is, what is meaningful for us in our relationships. And then how do we communicate effectively if we feel like someone's taking advantage? And that is where the difficult conversations come in, and having some, wise guidance on how to best do that to maintain the strength and the love of the relationship is usually really valuable, Laura. So again, you've got so many skills that you can offer to people in terms of both the counseling, and I love that it's fortified with Reiki as well. So people have that opportunity to experience both sides of your modalities. So is there anything that you would like to share in addition to what we've already spoken about today?
I would just say notice when something is making you uncomfortable. And it's probably an odd thing. So whether it's a feeling or a person or a situation, notice and pay attention to it. I think particularly again as women and healers, if something makes us uncomfortable, where we tend to just push through because we need to see the client, we need to earn the money, we need to take care of the thing. But that feeling of anxiety or fear or apprehension, it's there for a reason. And
Mm,
that's something I
mm,
work with a lot with my clients. Quite often it's like, "Oh, I don't have any reason to feel this particular way." It's like, "Yeah, you
mm,
do. Yeah, you do."
mm,
And if it turns out that we explore that and, do the therapy around it and do the Reiki around it, maybe it's a legitimate feeling. And I just, in general, would love it if people paid more attention to how they feel about things.
mm. Yeah, and to me that ties into what I teach as well with your intuition, that gut that gut feeling, that gut connection, that first thought. I wrote about it in my book, a whole situation where I had those feelings. We called them red flags in the end. When we worked out there was not just one red flag, but I kept making excuses for the way I felt because I wanted to be kind or wanted to help or felt that I should be. And we do it so much where we put others' needs above our own and make their needs more important than what we're feeling. So that's a really valid point for people, especially empaths and healers, light workers, to really, validate their emotions, validate their feelings. And I think there's nothing more important, to be honest. And it is the gateway to our intuition. Our emotions tell us when we're in alignment, and when we're not. So speaking of that, I would love to bring Anya through, because I like at the end of these interviews, the human is a very complex experience, and we like that you both have resonated with the different ways in which emotions can bring to the surface complex issues that are best dealt with. Within relationships, there is quite often mirrors to your experience that can be reflected through one another and through the very powerful connection. It is the very thing that allows you to sense and feel when you're in alignment and when you're living life to an accordance with what brings you a sense of peace and a sense of connection and happiness. And there are many different strategies and many different techniques that you can engage. We like that healers take different tools and techniques and lean on different ones at different times in order to find clarity and in order to find peace around certain circumstances. And what we also would like to remind you is that it's not as difficult as you think. So quite often humans get very caught up in resistance and fighting the very emotions, and there is a tendency to suppress them, when in fact, if they just allowed that emotion to come up and sat with it for a few moments and brought just simply an awareness to what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they've experienced, it doesn't take much to gain a neutral perspective on it, which is part of what we do when we blend with our human counterparts, is bring a more balanced perspective to the very, at times, hot emotional experiences. We say hot as in the fluctuations of energy and the rise and falls and the peaks and troughs of life's experience. And it is where we find the most interest. It is part of our desire to help humans learn how to navigate through the challenging situations with more ease and more grace. And part of that is exactly as you two have described and have spoken about. It is about self-understanding, self-compassion, bringing love to any problem or challenge that you're facing. There is always a spiritual solution to any problem. It doesn't necessarily come with ease. Sometimes the solutions that will actually ease the bigger burden may have to go through a challenging experience in order to bring about change. And that is where support can best help you navigate through the difficulties of change, when and if it's the right time for that person to do so. We would love to answer any questions if you have one for us, Laura.
I guess just, am I on the right track with all of this? Because this hybrid way of working, I love it.
About it,
But is it helpful? Yeah.
Yes. Well, the thing is that there are limitations within some of the therapeutic practices, and they don't, from what we're feeling and tuning into from you, they don't always take into an account the energetic experience of the human and the energetic way in which humans interact. In fact, everything is energy, but the mental modality faces the problems and challenges through a mental lens and an emotional lens, and doesn't necessarily take into the bigger underlying beliefs that also contribute to the challenges that humans face. So we always suggest that you operate in a way that is integral with your own values and your own principles and your own beliefs. And that might mean that at different times you have to wear different hats. It might mean that in order to satisfy the legalities or the recommendations of one modality might be that it's experienced in total separation to another. And so it's offered as perhaps a different experience for people. There will be a underlying connection that runs as a thread through what it is that you do and how you operate. We have seen through Lisa's experience that in the beginning, in the early years, with little experience, it was much easier for her to follow those that have gone on before and follow the rules as that was laid out for her to do so, because someone that does not have a breadth of experience within a certain modality does best to just follow the rules until they themselves have that breadth of experience. Once they have, they understand through their own personal experiences where those rules can be applied and where they can be gently moved around. Does that make sense? So always for the benefit of the client and the therapeutic relationship as a whole. And when there is that integrity that stands as the basis with which you work, is to work in a way of assisting the outcome is positive for the interaction together. It can be gently navigated, and it is also an understanding of checking in with yourself as to whether you know the work that you're doing is in balance and is working in an ethical way. And when you know that it is, you can rest assured. Whether you would get others acknowledge different modalities, perhaps it would not come if they have not yet experienced it themselves. So sometimes there is just a blanket no because they do not understand what it is. And without the breadth of understanding what it is, it's hard for them to make a decision to say yes or no. So sometimes they just stick with the modality that is known and they make rules around that one, because there are so many different ways that humans can interact and so many different modalities. And again, as you said earlier, that also depends on the needs of the human. And some modalities just simply will not resonate with some humans. So therefore, it would make sense that you put on the clinical hat for that person. And someone that is totally open to energy and loves it and has experienced it, so has that full breadth of understanding and awareness, then it would make sense that you could lean into that area with them. We have enjoyed this interaction and look forward to connecting with you all again. Namaste. Thank you again, Laura, for sharing your wisdom and heart with us today. So for those who would love to connect with you and learn more about your work, how can they find you?
My website is lauramcveigh.com.au. I am on most of the social media sites as well, and I'm working on being more consistent about posting particularly Reiki videos, so do come over and encourage me there.
Beautiful. Do you have any special offers for our listeners?
Listeners can receive 10% off their first individual session using the code POD10, so POD10, and that's valid for the next 6 months.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. And I will put all Laura's links to be able to access that special rate at the end in the show notes. So thank you again, Laura, for sharing your wisdom and heart with us today. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Remember, taking care of yourself isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Until next time, be kind to yourself, honor your energy, and keep shining bright. See you in the next episode.